The penthouse of the Salesforce tower in San Francisco was buzzing with the elite tech crowd. It was the 5th anniversary gala for Nexus, the startup that had disrupted the cloud computing industry. Ava stood near the glass wall, looking out at the Bay Bridge. She wore a simple black dress, her hair tied back, a sharp contrast to the diamonds and silk surrounding her. For 5 years, she had been the backbone of this company. While her husband, Ethan, was the face on the magazine covers, Ava was the one who wrote every line of the core engine. She was the ghost in the machine, the invisible partner who sacrificed her own career to build his. Ethan stepped onto the stage, the spotlight reflecting off his expensive watch. Ava smiled, expecting a tribute, a simple thank you for the woman who had spent sleepless nights debugging his dreams. But as Ethan adjusted the mic, his voice turned cold. "Nexus has reached a turning point," he began, his eyes scanning the room but avoiding Ava's. "To scale to the next level, we need a fresh vision. We need leadership that isn't tied to the past." He signaled to a waiter, who walked over to Ava and handed her a silver tray. On it was a single, heavy manila envelope. "Ava," Ethan said into the mic, his voice booming through the silent hall, "as of tonight, the board has voted to terminate your consultancy. Your access to the campus and the servers is revoked effective immediately." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Standing next to Ethan was Sloan, the company's new CFO, wearing a triumphant smirk. Ava looked at the envelope. It wasn't just a termination. It was a pre-drafted divorce settlement. Ethan wasn't just firing his lead architect. He was erasing his wife in front of the world. Nexus doesn't need a housewife pretending to be an engineer anymore. Ethan whispered just loud enough for the front row to hear. Ava didn't scream. She didn't cry. She felt a strange, cold clarity wash over her. She looked at Ethan, the man she thought she knew, and realized he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He thought he owned the kingdom, but he had forgotten who had built the fortress. Ava walked out of the gala, the cool San Francisco fog biting at her skin. She didn't go back to their $10 million mansion in Pacific Heights. She knew Ethan would have already changed the locks. Instead, she drove to a small, dusty studio apartment in the Mission District, the place where they had started everything. Inside, her best friend and legal mentor, Harper, was waiting with 3 laptops and a mountain of files. Harper looked at Ava's calm face and sighed. He actually did it, didn't he? The public humiliation route? He thinks he's untouchable, Ava said, sitting down and opening a laptop. He moved all our joint assets into offshore trusts last month. He thinks he's left me with nothing but a severance check and a broken heart. The Harper handed her a tablet. He forgot one thing, Ava. The IP. Intellectual property. In the United States, tech law is a battlefield. Ethan had assumed that because they were married, the code Ava wrote belonged to Nexus, but Harper had found the original contracts from 5 years ago because Ava had developed the core algorithm before the company was officially incorporated, and before they were married, she held the primary copyright. She had never officially signed it over. She had only granted a temporary usage license. He's trying to sell Nexus to a global conglomerate next week for $800 million, Harper explained. But he can't sell what he doesn't own. Without your signature on the IP transfer, the whole deal is illegal. Ava's fingers began to fly across the keyboard. She wasn't just looking at contracts. She was looking at the code itself. Deep within the Nexus engine sat a logic bomb, not a virus, but a security protocol she had written years ago as a failsafe. It was designed to trigger if the company underwent an unauthorized merger without the lead, architect's biometric bypass. Ethan had called her our housewife. He had treated her like an appliance he could unplug and replace with a newer model like Sloan. As Ava watched the lines of green code scroll past, she felt a surge of power. Ethan had the fame, the suit, and the spotlight, but Ava had the keys to the kingdom. She hit the enter key, and a silent countdown began. In 48 hours, the empire Ethan thought he stole would simply cease to exist. The following morning, the Nexus headquarters was in a state of total collapse. The fresh vision Ethan had bragged about was staring at black screens. The entire cloud infrastructure had gone into a read-only lockdown. No data could be moved. No deals could be processed. And most importantly, the $800 million merger audit was stalled. Ethan was pacing his glass office, screaming at his IT team. "Fix it! I don't care what it takes!" Sloane stood by the window, her face pale. "Ethan, the auditors are calling. If the system isn't up by noon, the deal is dead. We'll be sued for fraud." Ethan's phone buzzed. It was an encrypted message from an unknown source. It contained a single image, a photo of the coffee shop where he and Ava had had their first date, followed by a time 11 a.m. Ethan felt a chill. He realized then that Ava wasn't just a scorned wife. She was the architect of his destruction. He arrived at the coffee shop 10 minutes early, looking disheveled. Ava was already there, sipping a latte, looking more relaxed than he had seen her in years. Harper sat beside her, a legal folder open on the table. "Fix the system, Ava," Ethan hissed as he sat down. "I'll give you an extra $10 million in the settlement. Just stop this madness." Ava looked at him with genuine pity. "It was never about the money, Ethan. It was about the fact that you thought you could erase me. You took my work, my years, and my heart, and you tried to trade them in for a younger model and a bigger paycheck." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The logic bomb is tied to my biometric signature. You can't hack it. You can't bypass it, and in 60 minutes the Nexus source code will self-delete. Every server, every backup, every line of data, you'll be left with a billion-dollar company that has no product." Ethan's hand shook as he reached for his water. He looked at Sloane, who had followed him and was standing by the door. She wasn't looking at him with love. She was looking at him like a sinking ship. The reality hit him. He had gambled his entire life on the idea that Ava was weak. And he had lost. The merger meeting was supposed to be the crowning achievement of Ethan's life. Instead, it became his public funeral. The boardroom was filled with high-stakes investors and lawyers from the acquiring firm. Ava walked in not as a disgruntled ex-wife, but as the majority owner of the technology they were trying to buy. She didn't say a word. She simply let Harper present the evidence. The copyright infringement claim was ironclad. The fraudulent asset transfer documents were even worse. Ethan had used company funds to buy gifts for Sloane and Hyde, money from the IRS. In the U.S., these weren't just civil issues. They were federal crimes. Sloane was the first to break. Seeing the inevitable prison time, she turned over her private emails with Ethan, proving that they had conspired to push Ava out and steal her intellectual property. The investors were horrified. Within 2 hours, the $800 million deal was canceled. Nexus's stock price plummeted to near zero. Ethan sat at the head of the table, his head in his hands. He had gone from a billionaire in waiting to a man facing a decade of litigation and bankruptcy. Ava stood up to leave. Ethan grabbed her arm, his voice cracking. "Ava, please. We can fix this. We're a team." Ava gently pulled her arm away. "No, Ethan, you were the face. I was the team. You just forgot to pay the architect." As she walked out of the building, the news was already breaking on CNBC and Twitter. The tech golden boy was a fraud. Ava felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She had spent 5 years in the shadows, making sure Ethan shone. Now the shadow was gone, and the light was all hers. She didn't feel a need for revenge anymore. She felt a need for a new beginning. She drove to Harper's office and signed the final papers. She wasn't taking half of Ethan's empire. She was taking the parts that mattered, the IP, the house, and her dignity. Ethan could keep the empty office and the mountain of debt. He had wanted the spotlight so badly. Now he had it, and the whole world was watching him fall. 6 months later, the tech world was still talking about the Nexus meltdown. But the focus had shifted. A new company had emerged from the ashes called Apex. It was led by Ava, and its culture was built on transparency and shared credit. She had hired back all the talented engineers Ethan had mistreated. Ava was no longer the invisible partner. She was the most sought-after CEO in Silicon Valley. She was on the cover of Forbes, but this time, the headline read, "The Architect Who Rebuilt Herself." Ethan was living in a small, rented apartment in San Jose, working as a low-level consultant to pay off his mounting legal fees. Sloane had long since vanished, moving on to her next target as soon as the money dried up. One evening, Ethan saw a clip of Ava's keynote speech at a major tech conference. She looked radiant, powerful, and completely at peace. She spoke about the importance of integrity and innovation. She didn't mention Ethan's name once. To her, he wasn't a villain anymore. He was just a ghost from a past life that she had outgrown. Ava returned home that night to her quiet, beautiful house overlooking the Pacific Ocean. She sat on the deck, listening to the waves. Harper was there, celebrating another successful quarter. "You know," Harper said, "people are calling you the Queen of the Pivot." Ava laughed, a sound of genuine joy. "I didn't pivot, Harper. I just stopped letting someone else drive my car." She realized that her success wasn't a result of Ethan's failure. It was a result of her own reclamation. She had learned that in life, as in code, you have to be careful about who you give admin access to. She looked out at the horizon, where the sun was setting in a blaze of orange and purple. The future was wide open, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't building it for anyone else. She was building it for herself. Brick by careful brick, line by perfect line. The invisible architect was finally, gloriously visible.